All right. Good morning, Doug. We have questions from members of the file. These are subscribers to Crisis Investing. Get access to our private community file. If you're interested in that, go to crisisinvesting.com and sign up. But first, I wanted to talk to you about this pretty interesting headline I saw just today, and that's the Department of Homeland Security is exploring a reality TV show where migrants compete for citizenship. What do you think about that idea?
I I think it's great fun. I think it's wonderful. It's part of life, imitating artwork, is what it is. And of course, the natural question that comes up is it going to be kind of a game show? Is it going to be? Is it going to be maybe in the direction of the Squid Game, or in the direction of Running Man, if you
That's what
remember
I'm
that.
hoping for. I'm hoping for Running Man.
Yeah, I thought it was a fun movie, incidentally. So,
Or Hunger Games.
Hunger Games, yes, that would be another possibility. So all these people want to get in, and who can play this game? Would it be somebody that's already here illegally? And if they win the game, you forget about the fact that they broke a law, or not. This was unclear to me.
Yeah. Yeah, they haven't really gotten through on all the details for it yet, but at least not that I saw. But I think it's kind of it is funny that, I mean, Trump is a huge reality TV star, and I feel like sometimes we're living in a reality TV life with what's happening in the world, all the drama. And so I guess this is probably makes perfect sense to him. That's something we should do.
It kind of completes the merger between government and the entertainment complex. We've already had a merger of the government and the corporate world, classical fascism, and the universities are pretty well taken over by the government, as evidenced by uh, uh, people are coming to the realization how many billions of dollars the government sends off to big universities now. So yeah, we should take over the reality world too. That's great.
Yeah, and maybe you have different shows for different people. So like the people that they would, once they fill up the available space in El Salvador, those guys get Running Man, and then another version for the dreamers, for the people who were born here but or no, who were brought here when they were young or something, that were Obama said that they were legal to stay. Maybe a softer and gentler version of that. That's kind of like a Big Brother type of a game. Who
Yeah.
gets kicked off the
So
island first?
that's right, a softer and gentler version of the Squid Games, perhaps. So
Yeah.
yeah, of course, anything's possible in this make-believe world we live in. And I increasingly, we've talked about this in the past. I mean, I think an increasingly good case can be made that we live in a hologram, and actually none of this is actually real at all.
Yes. Yes. Well, I call it a simulation, but yeah, it is holographic, I think. And you know that apparently that there was that they already, as part in that article I shared with you, that Amazon's already done a deal to distribute a documentary on First Lady Melania Trump.
Saw that, and the number is $40 million is what she is going to get. Is that what she gets, or is that what they're going to spend on the production? It was unclear to me, or I don't remember exactly.
Well, I mean, they said it was a licensing deal to distribute, which sounds like it doesn't have anything to do with the production of it. I mean, maybe they would use that money to produce it, but they're paying for the license to play it on Amazon Prime.
Well, this is further proof of how terrible and degraded reporting is, because if a reporter is going to do a story on that, there are certain questions and clarifications that a few questions would clear up, and they don't do it. So
They don't
we
do
know
it.
that $40 million is probably going to be floating around, and where it goes, nobody knows.
Well, and there's all kinds of weird things like this with Trump too that are happening, like this blending of, it used to be you'd go to office, like Obama, right? Yeah, you're in office, and then you get these huge book deals, and like that's the way these you'd get rich. But I think Trump thinks bigger about these things than
Yeah,
others do.
he's got to think, well, because he was wealthy, unlike Obama. Uh, I mean, it is amazing that Obama, who was a impecunious community organizer, uh, is now quite wealthy. What's he worth? 100 million? He's gotten movie production deals. He's gotten book deals.
He's got to be worth more than 100 million, I
Got to
bet.
be worth more than 100 million. I mean, for God's sake, he probably looks at Vladimir Zelensky in the Ukraine, and even when the Panama Papers reported on how much money he had offshore through that law firm in Panama, even then he was worth 600 million, and now he's probably worth a couple billion. So Obama's got to be saying, God, even Zelensky is worth a couple billion. I've got to pick up the pace a little bit.
Yeah, and he thinks. I mean, Trump thinks big. I mean, this whole Qatari jet, that they're donating for him to
Yeah.
use.
So yeah. So who are the Qataris going to give the jet to exactly? The U.S. government or to who? How's
Well,
it work?
I guess it goes, as I understand it, it goes to the Defense Department, but then after that, it's part of the Trump library.
Okay, and what happens? Are they going to build an especially large room at the library, wherever it is?
Yeah, I guess that they're gonna have a hangar at his library and I think he's just working out a way he can still utilize this amazing jet when his presidency is over with.
Yeah, somehow that part seems a little bit improper. I mean, if the Qataris want to give it to the U.S. government, that's one thing, but to give it to Trump indirectly through his library,
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't seem good, but does that feel dirtier than the Trump coin, the meme coin?
no. Anyway, corruption is uh, a necessary part of government. And I would build the argument that corruption is not only necessary, but believe it or not, it's generally a good thing when you're dealing with the government. It's like Tacitus said, uh, the more the laws, the more corrupt the government.
Hmm.
They go together. They go together. And at least corruption allows you to get around the more stupid laws. And people never think, oh, wait a minute, maybe if we want to abolish corruption, we shouldn't just make it illegal. We should actually get rid of the laws that make it necessary.
We should, but there's this in your face kind of self-dealing stuff that happens with Trump that maybe has never been as obvious before. Maybe it just shows the state of the world. Just everything is degraded to this point. And maybe it's because people like Biden lack the imagination, to do stuff. But like Trump's done this, he has this other coin like he's trying to create a stable coin. I don't know if you've heard about this. I think that they
Oh,
call it
yeah, right. And
World Liberty Financial.
yes, and he's gotten the Saudis or somebody to put $100 million into it, or is it more, a billion?
He got Abu Dhabi to put in 2 billion.
2 billion. Well, that's a pretty good scam because just the management fee on that off the top for the coin managers would be, I don't know what they get, 0.5%. Well, they can get what they want actually. So it's a great indirect way to get a payoff, completely legal, above
Yeah,
board.
yeah. There's so many things like this though. Let's see.
Let
Oh
me
yeah,
see, on 2 billion, oh, yeah, this is the problem with all these zeros is that, as humans, we're used to thinking two, three, many. That's the way primitive people think, two, three, many. And here we are dealing with lots and lots of zeros. So this should be very simple. If you divide 2 billion, which is the number, I guess, by 100, what do you get? You get 20,
20 million,
20 million. Okay,
isn't it?
1% fee. So even a half of a percent fee, that's like $10 million a year with very little in the way of operating costs. It's a good scam.
Yeah, and if you're on the 2 and 20 plan, it's, 40 million. But, basically I think what they remember Nick Giambruno was explaining to us when we were in Buenos Aires, talking about Tether and what Tether was doing, as a stable coin. And, essentially people to get the stable coin and then they use all that, they buy treasuries and they're earning like 4.25% on it, which they pay no interest on. They've got like 30 employees. And they're making money hand over fist and it's like it's just exploded. And I just think they look at that. That's the goal. They want to compete with that, as a different stable coin. And but it's really a weird position for them, for him to be the one doing that, I think. But you know,
Well, it's frankly, it's unseemly for high government officials or close relatives to be doing this type of thing. And of course, I disapprove of Pepe Mojica's politics, who was the recently deceased, he just died of last week or something like that.
we did. I
President,
didn't know.
oh yeah, Pepe,
Oh,
president of Uruguay,
I missed that.
died. And of course, he was a guerrilla during the 60s and 70s and an avowed socialist. And, all of his political ideas were horrible. But the good thing about Pepe was that he was the real deal when it came to living in his, very, 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 very simple old house on a small plot of land. And, I mean, he talked the talk and walked the walk. And so he wasn't corrupt. And that's nice. So no wonder Uruguayans liked him.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, we don't do that, and I don't, and all the Trump voters just like passed all this stuff like, oh, it's fine, it's no big deal, but it just, to me, it's just a sign of the times that
Yeah.
we're in, and it's not that Trump is doing these things in a creative public manner, whereas what is it, that all these things with Biden where he got 10 million from the Chinese and
Well, all
10
under,
big guy and all this, yeah, how he owns all these houses and how all the other politicians are rich. I guess Trump's doing it differently, but taking advantage of his position, certainly. I mean,
I'd certainly like to see, well, Biden, of course, has been exposed. Whether he'll be prosecuted is a different question. But I'd like to see how Bernie Sanders explains the multi-millions of dollars he has in houses. How'd that happen? And AOC is apparently pretty well to do now. In fact, all of these people. So I hope this is one of the things that Doge overturns, and many of them are prosecuted.
oh, I'd love to see that. I'm waiting for the first indictment of anyone, though, Doug. You
Uh,
know,
I hope we don't have to wait forever, which we very well may, just like the reveal on Epstein, which is turned into, well, we can't, we have to delete references to this person and that thing. And so it's all going to be a big nothing. These people,
God.
the ruling class, I mean, these people, uh, they pretend they cover each other. Now, Trump is a little bit of an outsider because they hate him and he hates them. But still, I was disappointed that this Epstein thing wasn't totally exposed. He's probably got buddies that are wrapped up in it, and he wants to naturally defend his buddies. But
Yeah. Still, though, I mean, there's this other thing he does. So I just asked ChatGPT like what questionable self-dealing things. It came up with this list of them. It says, well, it talks about the $400 million Qatari Air Force One as one potential conflict of interest. or self-dealing. Then it talks about Gulf real estate expansion spree. Apparently, Trump organization has announced an 80-story Trump International Hotel and Tower in Dubai, $5.5 billion Trump International Golf Club and Luxury Villa Complex in Qatar, and in Saudi Arabia, the new Trump Tower Jeddah, which is $530 million. Then he's got the Trump and Melania meme coins, the $2 billion Abu Dhabi bail-in for Trump's crypto company, World Liberty Financial.
Mhm, mhm.
He's apparently trying to buy back the DC old post office hotel. I don't know why that would be a big issue, but
Oh, is that is that the one next to the White House, the old Willard Hotel that has changed names in
yeah,
the
he
past?
bought and he owned it at one point.
He owned it, right? And then I don't know what's going on there, but you know, this would all be a non-problem if government was totally uninvolved in the economy. If the government did nothing but protect the U.S. borders from foreign invaders, military, domestic criminals, common law crimes only, domestically, and a court system. And none of this would all be academic because there'd be no favors that the government could dispense. But the government
Mhm.
owns and controls everything now, as we were talking about earlier. So maybe the US government should get a royalty on the new running man with migrants.
I hope so. Yeah, you know what this is? You could put it in the sovereign wealth fund. We found something for it.
Oh, yeah, right. And of course, there's been some discussion about this, and I've heard that Trump is actually doing the intelligent thing. You can't have a sovereign wealth fund if the government is massively in debt. You got to pay off the debt before you can have a sovereign wealth fund. I mean, this
Hmm.
is,
I mean, that like rationally that makes sense, but what have you heard Trump say about it recently?
I think I heard him say words to that effect, but maybe I really just heard somebody say that they heard it.
Yeah, I don't know. So you got to talk to Lutnick about that. I think he's pretty sure we can do it because their whole idea is that they want to make it so that when they do these government contracts, that they get warrants,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
those warrants go in the sovereign wealth fund.
yeah. It was just like the first time well, was it the first time? Yes, it was that I was pitching my privatization deal to foreign governments. And it was such fun when that high government official in Dominica said, you know, Mr. Casey, tell me more about those warrants.
Those warrants. The warrants are the key, and it's no surprise that it came from a Wall Street guy suggesting this idea to the Trump administration.
Of course, one thing that I think they're going to spring on the world is that all of the assets of the U.S. government are actually right now they're dead money. Uh, the huge amount of land that's owned by the BLM and the Forest Service and God knows who else, it's all dead money, misallocated, misused. So they're probably going to try something to trade it for the national debt or social securities liabilities or something, some kind of a financial. And the good news is that if it's privatized, I'm not sure it would be, or whether it's just going to be some financial chicanery to make it look like the debt's gone away.
Didn't they do something like that in Germany, in Weimar, Germany, with like they tried to back the the Deutschmark by real estate at
Uh,
some point?
well, actually, the most what you may be thinking about before the French Revolution with the assignats,
Oh, they did that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
when they took all the, was it was it before or did the revolutionaries do it with the assignats? Yes. Anyway, they took all of the confiscated church land and government land and printed up funny money called assignats that were backed by the land. Hey,
And
how could you go
it worked
wrong?
so well they did it again.
Right. And again
And
and again.
again, printed more and more. Yeah.
Yeah. So this underlines the difference between backing a currency with something or making it directly redeemable precisely at a fixed rate or something. And for that purpose, you can only use gold, frankly.
That's right. Okay, well, let's get to some of these questions people have. So, first question is, with gold prices almost straight up 30% since the US election, silver has basically bounced around 7%. You both talk about gold frequently, but not too often about silver. What are your short and longer term thoughts on silver?
Well, I own a lot of silver, actually, and have for quite a while. And I plan on continuing to own it because the ratio between gold and silver, back in the days when there were silver gurus that had silver letters, none of them exist anymore. Uh, they all talked about the historic ratio being 17 to 1 or on that order. But now it's about 100 to 1 between gold and silver. And it's been as high as 120. I don't know what it should be. Nobody knows. It's a question of all kinds of different things. Everything from the mine production of both of them to the recycling of above ground supplies. All the gold that's ever been mined is still there. Most of the silver that's ever been mined is not there. It's been used like an industrial metal. So there's about 1 billion ounces of silver that's mined every year, but basically from silver mines, basically as a byproduct of copper and gold and zinc mines.
Hmm.
So, and it's a very complex situation, but the answer to the question, if somebody was asking my opinion, yeah, I'm quite bullish on silver at this point. It'll have its day in the sun again.
Well, and if they, I mean, they got to devalue the currency. I mean, that's the only way out of the trap that the US is in. And in that environment, any real thing should go up in value as measured in dollars, right?
Yep, and everybody should have a whole bunch of 1 ounce silver coins or old pre-1966 US silver coins. Although I like the 1 ounce coins because it's 1 ounce, you know exactly how much it is. People don't really know how much silver is in a quarter.
Is that what they refer to as junk silver?
Chunk silver, right? Yeah,
Yeah, you
exactly.
get it, you order it by the bag or something.
You order it by the bag. So in a bag of junk silver, $1,000 of base value, uh, it weighs about uh, 50, 60 pounds anyway. And you get 700, approximately 715 ounces, troy ounces of and there's 10%
Silver
copper
content. Mm.
too, uh, of silver. So what would that be worth? 700 ounces times $30 an ounce. Uh, a bag of silver is like $22,000 now.
Mm. Okay. Doug, have you ever watched the show, the short-lived sci-fi show Firefly? He said it's one of the most libertarian shows ever made, a bit like Deadwood. It's not nearly as violent as Deadwood or as vulgar as Deadwood, but have you seen
Oh,
that?
yes, I'm a big fan of Firefly, and they also made a movie afterwards called what was that movie called? It was pretty good. Uh,
What
I
was that?
can't remember the name of the movie that kind of summed it up.
Uh, Let me look it up. Firefly made movie. I don't know why I can't remember either.
Begins with a P, I think. Am I right?
I'm not finding it. I'm not sure why. Oh, Serenity.
Serenity, that's what it was. Yeah. Hey, it was a great series. It was a good movie. Love them. I mean, nothing can compare with Deadwood from my point of view. The only thing that I found that really is kind of in the direction of Deadwood for the writing and the plot and the acting is I'm a big fan of Justified, which incidentally stars
Timothy Elephant. Yeah.
who is the kind of the sheriff in both series.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's a good show.
Yeah, but watch watch Firefly and see Serenity, and definitely watch Deadwood, which in my opinion is the best thing that's ever been done on television ever since Shakespeare, and also Justified.
You just got to prepare yourself for the vulgarity. It's so shocking at first when you first start watching it. No kids around. First of all, don't have your kids around.
The kids all use these words though in day-to-day
No,
language.
no, no. There's some of them they don't. Like in the
Oh,
first episode, I started watching. I watched it a long time ago, and I started rewatching it, and I
yeah.
was remember thinking, was happy that my kids were not in earshot because it was so vulgar. I was watching it with Jane even, and I'm like, is this too? Is this pushing it over the limit with you?
You know, these the vulgarities are thrown around. The general use of the language is Shakespearean.
It
So
is.
it's in a classical context, which cleans it up a lot.
That's what I'm just saying. You just gotta make it. You gotta your ear will adjust to both the vulgarity and the Shakespearean nature of the language that's spoken
Yeah. And the
after a
violence
couple episodes.
and the violence of it is really quite graphic and
It is.
gritty.
It's
But
gritty.
you know, having watched being a Deadwood connoisseur, I've got to say that whenever a moral question arises, I often ask myself, what would Al Swearingen do?
Yes, and it's not clear that Al's the guy you'd want to ask that until you get further on in the series and you kind of start to understand what he's doing.
Yeah, you do. You come from thinking Al is definitely the most evil person that ever lived to a good guy that you're really very likable. Well,
Yeah,
what a crap star.
it's a great show. I gotta rewatch it.
Yeah, this is
Um,
pure entertainment.
let's see. What are both your thoughts? This kind of relates actually to the executive order named "Make Bribery Great Again." And it's the order that makes bribery of non-Americans by Americans legal until at least August 2025. And what this is that they're, you probably know the name of the law. It basically it's the Foreign Corruption and Practices Act, I guess. It's like if you want to do business in some country and like nothing will get done unless you pay off this minister, it just can't get done. And so
Right.
it's like cut. So it either forces American companies to break the law, a serious law, it's a felony, or they lose out on the business because someone else will get it. And so,
Yeah,
what do you think of them getting rid of that?
I think it's great because I think we well anticipated this. Was talking about Tacitus, and the more numerous the laws, the more corrupt the country, and so forth. It's absolutely true. And the question comes up, well, should the US government have anything to do with what an American businessman does with the foreign government? And I would say the answer is no.
Yep, I agree. And honestly, it should just be a line item on their income statement. You know, it's like you could put it under marketing. You know, or they could put it under. You know what I mean? It's just it is a legitimate cost of doing business in many parts of the world. That is a reality that exists, and they like to pretend it doesn't, and you know, make it criminal. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I mean, we're not the world's policemen that enforce our moral values on other countries. It's
right.
improper.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like this. It's the reality of doing business when you know, especially I think you know, as the U.S. has taken a more like active role recently in trying to compete with China, to try and get countries on our side versus others. You know, to get African countries to choose to do business with an American mining company instead of a Chinese mining company, and you don't allow them to play the game that must be played in some parts of Africa. I mean, there's no chance of winning. So it makes sense that they did it.
Yeah, yeah, no question about it. It's and the fact that the Americans have laws against these things makes Americans or America look like total hypocrites. Because foreigners are aware of the horrible things the US government does and how the government itself bribes other governments and companies, but then they make a law against it. So they could only hold Americans in contempt and see them as immoral, unethical hypocrites. And if there's anything people recognize and hate, it's a hypocrite. So yes,
That's right.
that stupid law should be abolished forever, not just until whatever date.
Yeah, they only have it until August 2025, so time's running out. So get your business deals done, I guess, pretty quick. So I'm sure it'll be extended. All right, just a couple more questions here. We didn't have any questions this week, so if you guys have, so make sure you ask them if you want us to
I
cover
don't
them
think
on.
we asked for any because we didn't have a show on Wednesday.
Yeah, I didn't solicit them directly this time, so that probably hurt. But we have a standing place where people can always ask questions, both in Substack and on file. So, in any case, he says related to China trying to bypass the use of the U.S. dollar in its trade, particularly in Latin America, and the thought that China and other countries may try to tie their currency to gold and or other commodities. The question is, if this were to continue, what would be the impact on the U.S. economy or the U.S. dollar? Do you see China or any other state currency replacing the US dollar as the global reserve currency, or do you think it may be some sort of a gold commodity-backed stable digital coin?
Hmm. Well, those are really two questions. Will some other fiat currency replace the fiat US dollar? And yeah, it's possible, of course, if that currency is widely accepted enough because of the commercial prowess of the country involved, and that would be China. There's no other possibility, frankly. But then people are in a position of having to trust the Chinese yuan. And there's no reason to believe it's any more trustworthy than the US dollar. And there's plenty of indications that the Chinese economy is in a lot of trouble. These ghost cities, which have been built with private capital, exist. They're totally economic, and I think they're economic disasters in the wings, waiting. So how's the Chinese government going to solve that? Well, deflation or inflation. So look, the answer to the question is you need something that you can rely on. And you can't rely on any political fiat currency from any government. So you get back to gold. And I don't want to see a gold-backed currency. That's like assignats were real estate backed. It has to be redeemable at a fixed ratio on demand immediately by whoever issues it.
Hmm.
Maybe the Chinese will come up. I mean, they're very clever. They'll come up with a gold yuan, which would suit that characteristic.
It sounds like there's a version of that kind of exists already where with Russia, for instance, Russia selling its oil to China, they have to accept yuan for it because they can't go through the dollar system. So, but at the Shanghai Gold Exchange, they can immediately redeem for gold, the yuan that they got for gold. So it's like a step removed, but and apparently they announced in the last couple of weeks that the Shanghai Gold Exchange was going to build warehouses in different parts of the world to help facilitate this with more trade. So I think that there's one that they're building it's either Saudi Arabia or in the Emirates, where again so essentially they can buy oil from them in yuan, but that yuan is immediately converted to gold. So,
That would
but
make a lot
this
of
is only
sense.
on global trade though. This is only in settling between states. The Chinese
Yeah.
citizens are not going to have. I mean, they can buy gold, obviously, but the currency isn't backed by it, not fixed to it, obviously.
I think that's the direction that China and the world is going to move. And but who knows what Trump has got up his sleeve? Maybe there'll be a gold redeemable special US dollar floating parallel. anything's possible. You can do almost anything.
Yeah, and
And
they might, and if they're trying to win over, like, if they can't reconcile with China, and they're really going to try and really end up in a like a new kind of Cold War where the world bifurcates into two different blocks. If China is saying, hey, if you when you trade to us, you sell us your natural resources, we're going to pay you effectively in gold for that. And the U.S. is saying, "Hey, we'll pay you in more of our fiat dollars." I mean, I think we might that's one strike against our case. So I wouldn't be surprised then if it comes, if this Cold War or new Cold War emerges, that the U.S. does do something that mirrors what China's doing, so to take that advantage off the table, where
yeah,
the external dollar at least is convertible in certain trade deals or whatever with gold. But I doubt they'll do it internally. I don't think they're going to advantage the American citizens in any way by stabilizing the currency internally, unless they
no,
have.
we're the plebs, and we're a means to the ends of the elite. We're not worthy otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, it's maybe it goes back to a pre-1971 status, which advantages the dollar, or the dollar is good for foreigners, but the dollar for U.S. citizens doesn't retain that same benefit.
But
Still be better,
even that, as you pointed out, can only happen at much higher gold prices.
much higher. Yep. So there's a related question. Another subscriber asked this kind of as a follow-up to this prior question. What if countries keep issuing new fiat currencies and no gold or hard asset backing happens? The whole world is on fiat. Whomever switches to gold-backed currency first loses. Then there's no single global exchange currency, and the value of each fiat currency is just traded based on the economic factors. Size of the economy is as people will want the currency to trade with larger economies, etc. What does the world look like in 5 years if everyone stays on their own fiat currency?
Well, I guess the answer to the question is whichever fiat currency seems most stable and has the broadest reach, so it's more usable. That would be the answer to that question. But still, a gold currency would be far preferable to any of these floating abstractions issued by bankrupt governments, because they're all bankrupt at this point.
Right.
Not counting the fact that before this is all over, we're probably going to see a big war of some type between one or more or a whole bunch of parties. So you don't want to own, paper money when that's going on. It
Right.
comes back to gold again.
Yeah, and it does get too complicated with every different nation. That's trying to always having to trade into every other currency of every other nation that they do any business with. Like that's really complicated. The dollar makes that a lot easier, and gold would
Oh,
make
it's
it better.
much easier. Yeah, because look, any Asian or South American or African currency, they're basically worthless outside of the country that issues it. And they all have, or many of them have foreign exchange controls of one type or another, which further devalues the use of the currency. So, yeah, quite correct.
Doug, I'm going to send you a podcast you might want to listen to. Do you know who Grant Williams is?
Yeah, he runs a podcast
Yeah,
outfit.
he does. So
Yeah.
he's basically just doing one now, a series called like the 100-year reset, something like that. And he had Russell Napier on, the one of the most recent ones, and he has I shared it in file, but I'll send it to you. It's worth listening to, and actually I'll link to it in the description of this if people want to check it out, because they kind of hypothesize how this all works out, and they do imagine like that you end up having this Cold War scenario between them, and that the dollar system can still, he says, exist in that Cold War scenario, actually. Anyway, I'll send you. It's very interesting, but he says with capital controls.
Yeah.
Capital controls are will have to come, and they will come in. They can come in various forms. But I mean, if the dollar system is going to continue, it could only possibly continue with capital controls. It's worth listening to.
Yeah, on the face of it, that sounds quite correct. I'd like to. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's all we have for today. So if you guys, next time, I'll solicit questions and make sure we have got a whole bunch for you for next Friday, Doug.
Okay, I love answering questions. It makes me feel like I know more than I actually do.
You know a lot more than most of us, Doug. So anyway, thanks for your time and have a great weekend. And we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Matt.